The wind carried grit through the slats of the Whitlock barn, whispering warnings that no one inside heard, or cared to hear. Miriam stood barefoot in the straw, wrists bound in front of her with thin rope that had already burned her skin raw. Her stepmother had told her to wear something clean. She'd obeyed. The pale blue dress hung loose around her thin frame, the hem already dark with hay dust and spilled feed. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Outside, thunder grumbled low, as if the heavens themselves found the business inside shameful. 2 men waited by the wagon, one with a crooked hat and a fat tobacco plug in his cheek, the other tall and lean with ink stains on his fingers. They didn't look at Miriam, only counted coins and traded muttered judgments about spoiled goods and keeping bloodlines clean. Mrs. Whitlock stood by the barn door, not looking at the girl she'd raised since she was 5. "It's not that we don't love you," she said, voice calm as cold dishwater. "But it's the right thing. For the family. You understand." Miriam nodded, once. That was the trick of it. If she cried or begged, they'd win. And she'd already lost everything else. The man with the crooked hat reached forward and gripped her arm like he was hauling a sack of oats. She stiffened but didn't resist. What would be the point? A wagon wheel creaked. Across the valley, Enoch Pierce slammed his axe into the splitting stump for the last time that day. His shirt clung to his shoulders, soaked from neck to waist. Around him, the pine woods stood thick with silence, save for the occasional cracking branch or the faraway call of a night bird. He hadn't spoken 10 full sentences all day. Inside the lean-to shack where he kept the tools, his son Eliah, 11, was wrapping a fever blanket around his sister. Ruthie had been burning since noon, sweat soaking her curls, her breath shallow and dry. The boy had done what he could, boiled willow bark, whispered old hymns, but they needed town medicine. And they needed it now. Enoch grabbed his coat and rifle and started down the muddy road without saying a word. He didn't like town, didn't like the stairs, or the men who thought being widowed made him weak. But sickness made a man's preferences irrelevant. By the time he reached town, thunderclouds had bruised the sky and the wind pulled at his coat like a child begging him not to go any farther. But he heard something. Not a cry. Not even a shout. Just silence. Too much of it. Barns didn't go that still unless something ugly was going on inside. And sure enough, it was the Whitlock place. Enoch leaned against a tree just outside the barn, hearing only the shuffling of boots on packed earth and the rustle of money. Then he saw her. The girl, young, too thin, too proud, was being loaded into a wagon like a mule. Rope-bound, lips pressed tight, chin tilted toward the storm like she was daring it to strike her down. And then he saw the look in her eyes. Not fear. Not even sadness. Just a hollow, aching silence that reminded him of Ruthie the night her mother died. Without thinking, without even fully understanding why, Enoch stepped forward. "How much?" he asked. The trader turned, spit to the side. "She's already claimed." Enoch took a breath and let it out slow. "I'll trade 6 bundles of split pine. And a jug of turpentine." The man with the crooked hat blinked. "What in hell you want her for?" Enoch didn't answer. He just looked at the girl again. And she, in turn, looked at him like she was trying to decide if he was real. It wasn't kindness in his eyes. It was something else. Like he'd seen war and come back quieter. Like he knew what it meant to be left behind. The Whitlocks didn't argue. Didn't ask if Miriam wanted to go. They just took the offer. Clean and silent. By the time the wagon rolled off into the dusk, she was walking behind Enoch, arms unbound now, her steps silent in the mud. He didn't speak for the first mile. Neither did she. The path to his cabin cut through tall pine and glistening alder. She watched how sure his footsteps were, how he never looked back to check if she followed. That, too, was a kind of mercy. Eventually, he stopped near the creek to refill his canteen. She crouched beside him, rubbed her wrists raw, and asked in the smallest voice, "You got a name?" He nodded. "Enoch. Your kids know I'm comin'?" He hesitated. "No." She waited for anger, or a lie. But he said nothing more. Just handed her the canteen. She drank slow. Rain began to fall, slow drops like the earth itself was thinking things through. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk had surrendered to full night. A single lamp glowed inside. Through the window, Miriam saw a child asleep on a cot, face flushed with fever. Another child knelt beside her, a book open on his knees. Enoch opened the door. Miriam didn't step inside. He looked at her, not quite frowning. "You're not a prisoner." "Feels like I might be." He didn't argue. Instead, he stepped aside. Miriam walked into the warm room and immediately felt the weight of eyes. The boy stared first, Elijah, lean and wary, his grip tight on the book. Ruthie stirred but didn't wake. The fire crackled low. Enoch said, "She'll be staying." No further explanation. Elijah narrowed his eyes. "Is she our new mama?" Miriam flinched. "No," Enoch said quietly. "Then what is she?" There was a silence. "Heavy and awkward and true," Miriam said. "I'll be gone by spring." Enoch turned to stoke the fire. "Spring's a long way off." That night, Miriam slept on a blanket near the hearth. The wood popped and snapped beside her, and the children's breathing filled the cabin with a rhythm that almost felt like peace. But she didn't sleep. She remembered her stepmother's voice. The way the coins clinked in the bag. The way the rain fell on the wagon floor as it rolled toward a future she hadn't chosen. But then, she remembered the man who didn't speak unless he had to. Who didn't ask her to explain who she was or where she came from. And that was the strangest part. He didn't ask anything at all. Somewhere deep in the woods, wolves howled. Miriam didn't flinch. Neither did Enoch, who sat just outside the cabin, his rifle across his lap, watching the tree lean like it had betrayed him once. They didn't speak that night. But something in the silence said, this story wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The sun didn't rise so much as bleed into the clouds that morning. Pale and cold, without warmth. The snow had started sometime before dawn, coating the evergreens like dust on an old Bible. The wind made the cabin walls creak as though the wood itself wanted to shiver. Miriam rose before the others, careful not to make a sound. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet, but she liked the cold. It kept her awake. It reminded her she was still real. She stoked the fire, moving slow, her fingers still learning the rhythm of this house. There was no stove, only a flat iron plate and a black kettle hanging from the hook. She didn't know if they had coffee. She hadn't asked. She didn't ask much of anything. Behind her, Enoch stirred. He didn't speak, just sat up from his chair and rolled his shoulder like it still held some old wound. He didn't look at her, and she didn't expect him to. She poured him the first cup anyway. The children woke later. Ruthie still looked pale, though her fever had dropped. Elijah watched Miriam the way a dog watches a stranger near its food bowl, suspicious, ready to bark if needed. But he never said a word. Enoch left after breakfast. Said nothing, just strapped on his coat and picked up his axe like it was any other day. Miriam watched the door close behind him, and something in her chest pulled tight. She had never felt safe in a man's house before. But she also didn't feel safe out of it. The snow thickened by mid-morning. Elijah stayed inside, sharpening sticks and pretending they were arrows. Ruthie curled up in blankets, her head in Miriam's lap. The little girl liked the feeling of braids. Asked her to hum the same song twice. "They said you weren't family," Ruthie whispered once. Miriam paused, then kept braiding. "I ain't." The girl tilted her face up. "Pa let you in. That's something." Miriam didn't answer. The fire cracked. Her fingers trembled, just a little. She told herself it was the cold. Later that day, she went outside with a hatchet and brought in kindling. She split it the way Enoch had shown her, even though her palms weren't ready. Blood bloomed in one hand, but she wrapped it in cloth and said nothing. At dusk, Enoch returned with the wind howling behind him. He looked at the blood. Didn't comment. Just passed her a pair of worn leather gloves. Too big, but warm. She took them without thanks. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because the words might break something inside her. That night, the wind screamed. Ruthie curled close against her side, Elijah by the fire. Enoch didn't sleep, just sat in the chair again, rifle across his lap, eyes on the window. Miriam whispered, "They still watchin' for me?" Enoch didn't answer for a long time. Then, "I don't know." She leaned her head against the log wall and closed her eyes. "If they come, you ain't got to fight. You already did enough." A beat. Then he said, "They don't get to come back for you. Not twice." She didn't reply. But in the dark, her hands pulled the gloves tighter. The next morning, there were boot prints outside the cabin. Enoch followed them for half a mile, rifle slung low. Came back with snow on his shoulders and a face carved from stone. Elijah tried to ask questions, but Enoch just told him to keep inside. Miriam salted the meat in silence. Her breath came shorter that day, sharper. That night, a single knock came at the door. Enoch stood. Miriam went still, her hands clenching so tight they shook. He opened the door to nothing but wind. But pinned to the wood was a note. "She don't belong. Neither do you. This ends." The ink was smudged by snow, but the words still cut. Miriam read it over his shoulder. Her heart beat loud enough to drown out the storm. She said, "They'll be back." Enoch didn't argue. He nailed the shutters closed. Over the next days, the snow deepened and the silence grew heavier. Elijah started carrying a hatchet even inside. Ruthie asked if the men would take Miriam back. "No one's talking her," Enoch said, in a voice so final it made even the shadows hesitate. Miriam washed clothes in freezing water. Her knuckles cracked and bled. She said nothing. One night, she found Ruthie standing outside barefoot in the snow. The little girl was staring up at the stars. "They're whispering," she said. Miriam lifted her back inside, wrapped her in quilts, and sat beside her till she slept. But she didn't forget the look in the child's eyes. Like something was coming. Something the wind already knew. 2 nights later, Elijah spotted smoke in the trees. He didn't tell anyone until Miriam caught him staring out the window, fists clenched. She stood beside him. "You see someone?" He nodded. She stepped outside with her coat pulled tight and stared into the dark. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then she saw it, a figure in the trees. Tall, still, watching. She didn't run. She turned and walked back inside. Enoch met her eyes. He knew. The time for waiting was nearly over. She stayed up that night, near the hearth, singing low under her breath. Not in English. Not in any language the cabin knew. Just syllables her mother once sang by candlelight, before she was buried in red clay and silence. Enoch didn't stop her. The next day, Ruthie was better. Her fever broke for good. The snow lightened. Enoch gave Miriam a small tin box. Inside was a carved comb and a spool of thread. She didn't speak, only held it like it might vanish. Elijah gave her a book, an old one, pages frayed at the edges. "You like stories?" he asked. She nodded. "Tell me one then." And she did. Not loud, not cheerful, but slow and steady, like a stream running under ice. That night, no figures appeared in the trees. The next morning, they found a dead crow nailed to the barn door. Its wings spread wide. Eyes gone. Ruthie cried. Elijah grabbed the rifle. Miriam buried the bird without a word. Enoch stood beside her, his face darker than the sky. She finally asked, "Why'd you take me that day?" He was quiet a long time. Then, "I had 2 children. But no one to tell them the world was wrong sometimes." She looked at him. "You think I'm that person?" "I think you've been surviving too long to not be." She didn't cry. But something inside cracked. "Just a hairline fracture." She whispered, "They don't stop." "I don't either." The snow stopped falling. That night, the wind changed. They all felt it. A reckoning was coming. But they wouldn't meet it apart. Not anymore. Outside, the pine trees swayed like old men remembering sins. Inside, the fire burned steady. And the girl once sold to stay someone else's kind of pure, she stayed. The thaw began with the sound of water. At first just a trickle near the cabin's edge, then the low groan of ice pulling apart along the river. Trees creaked in the morning sun. Snow fell in clumps from branches, leaving the forest raw and dripping. Miriam stood barefoot on the cabin porch, breath ghosting in front of her. She'd come out to shake the rug but stayed for the silence. It wasn't peaceful. Not quite. But it was no longer cruel either. Inside, Ruthie's laughter bubbled, light and fleeting as a robin's wings. Elijah was chasing her with a wooden spoon. Enoch was somewhere out near the tree line, repairing the chicken coop after last week's wind had torn the roof clean off. Miriam turned back toward the door, then froze. A single scrap of cloth hung from a tree branch near the creek. Dark, torn, familiar. She stepped off the porch, feet crunching on frost-thin grass. Her heart picked up its pace, slow but sure, like a drum before war. She didn't call for Enoch. She didn't want to spook the children. And maybe if she looked close enough, it would be nothing. But when she reached the branch, she knew better. The fabric was from her old dress. The one she'd been wearing when they sold her. And someone had knotted it into the branch like a signal. She turned slowly. The woods behind her were still. But something was watching. That night, she said nothing. Sat quiet through supper, eyes on her plate. Enoch didn't ask, but he noticed. He always did. After the children were tucked in, he joined her by the fire. Said nothing for a long time. Finally, "You saw something." She didn't answer. Miriam. Her name in his mouth was a soft thing. Not like the Whitlocks had said it, like a burden or a stain. Enoch spoke it like it was something worth learning. She whispered, "They're close." He didn't look surprised. Just stood, crossed to the window, checked the boards. She rose too. "I don't want the children hurt. They won't be. You don't know that. I know I'll kill whoever tries." His voice wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was final. The next morning, she found Elijah hammering nails into a makeshift fence. Ruthie carried stones in her apron. No one told them what was happening, but they felt it. Children always know when the world shifts. Later that day, Miriam caught Enoch in the shed, going through an old trunk. Inside were relics of a past he never spoke about. A cavalry coat, a rusted revolver, a letter with a bloodstain on the corner. She didn't ask. Just waited. He said, "When the war ended, I came back to nothing. My house burned, my kin scattered." Miriam said, "So you built your own peace." He nodded once. "Took years. And now." He looked at her. "Now it's yours too." She looked down, unable to meet that. Not yet. That night, a horse's whinny broke the silence. Elijah looked up from the hearth. "You hear that?" Enoch reached for the rifle. Miriam moved fast, gathering Ruthie and pressing her into the back corner of the room. Outside, the moon lit the snow just enough to see 3 shadows on horseback at the tree line. They didn't speak, didn't move, just waited. Enoch stood at the window, gun at the ready. Miriam stayed behind him. One rider dismounted. It was Caleb Whitlock, her step-brother. He shouted, "That girl ain't yours. She don't belong here." Enoch didn't move. Caleb spat. "You want to keep her? Fine. But don't cry when they come for you." Enoch opened the door, stepped onto the porch. Miriam followed without thinking. "I ain't gonna warn you twice," Caleb said. Enoch raised the rifle, not pointing, just holding. "Leave," he said. Caleb's eyes flicked to Miriam. "You're dirt, girl. Always were," Pa said. "Your pa's dead," she said quietly. "And your mama sold me like meat. I ain't the one should be ashamed." That stopped him. For just a moment. Then he laughed, a hard, bitter sound. "Shame's comin', girl. You'll see." They rode off. Enoch didn't lower the gun until they were gone. Inside, no one spoke. Ruthie stared at Miriam like she was something made of iron. The fire popped. The wind howled. But no more horses came that night. The next day passed with strange stillness. The birds didn't sing. Even the trees seemed to wait. At dusk, Enoch pulled Miriam aside. "They're not done." "No. I can send you to the mill town. Safe place there. Sheriff's cousin runs a home." She cut him off. "I ain't leavin'." He looked surprised. "I was born into running. I don't want to die doing it." Elijah had overheard. He stepped into the room, face set. "They come back, we shoot." Ruthie was behind him, holding Miriam's old glove like it was sacred. That night, Miriam braided her hair and waited. She didn't cry. She didn't pray. She just watched the shadows outside get longer. At midnight, they struck. A rock through the window. A match to the barn. Enoch woke first, grabbed the rifle. Elijah behind him with the hatchet. Miriam got Ruthie, wrapped her in a blanket, and ducked behind the hearth. Flames licked up the barn walls outside. Horses screamed. Then footsteps. Boots on snow. Men's voices shouting. Enoch opened the door and fired once, into the air. Next one hits bone. Silence. Then Caleb's voice, closer. "We ain't here to kill, just to take what's ours." "She ain't yours," Enoch said. "She ain't yours either." "She is now." Miriam stepped out onto the porch, barefoot in the snow. Her breath came hard. Her heart pounded like a war drum. "Look at me, Caleb." He did. "You said I was dirt. But I survived you. And that means I'm more than you ever were." He moved like he might rush her. Enoch didn't wait. The next shot hit the ground near Caleb's foot. "I won't miss twice," he said. Caleb hesitated, then stepped back. The other two men followed. "You just made enemies, Pierce." Enoch shrugged. "Already had plenty." The fire from the barn burned higher. Elijah ran for water buckets. Miriam joined him. They didn't stop until the flames died to smoke. By dawn, the barn was gone. But the house still stood. The children still lived. And no blood had been spilled. As the sun rose behind the scorched beams, Miriam sat on the porch, black with soot, her hands blistered. Enoch sat beside her. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, he said, "They'll come again." She nodded. "Let them." He looked at her. "You afraid?" "Terrified." He gave the smallest smile. "Good. Means you got something worth losing." She looked at him. "I reckon I do." Inside, Ruthie was drawing with charcoal on scrap wood. Elijah was already trying to build a new chicken coop. The world hadn't stopped. But something in her had shifted. They weren't running. Not anymore. And when the next storm came, they'd face it, together. The ashes from the barn still clung to the earth like the memory of a scar, blackened wood, warped nails curled like broken fingers. They didn't rebuild right away. Enoch said the land needed to rest first. Miriam understood. Some things couldn't be forced. Not healing. Not trust. Not home. The town, though, didn't rest. Whispers had a way of drifting through the hills and pine, carried in coffee steam and passed hand to hand like secrets. By the week's end, folks in Granger's Hollow knew two things: that the Pierce barn had burned under suspicious circumstances, and that Enoch had taken in a girl with skin darker than his and claimed her like blood. No one said her name in the stores. They just paused when she walked in, their mouths stiff, their eyes sliding over her like she wasn't quite human. Not hated. Not welcome. Just misfiled. Miriam held her head high. She walked behind Enoch and beside the children, not a step out of rhythm. When Ruthie wanted ribbon from the mercantile, Miriam picked it out. When Elijah needed nails, she spoke with the clerk herself. No flinching. No looking down. But the eyes never stopped watching. At night, the house grew tighter. Enoch started sleeping lighter. Elijah, too. Ruthie had begun clinging to Miriam when storms rolled through, the girl's small hands curling in her braid like roots holding the earth. One morning, a stone was found on the porch. No note. Just a stone. Slick with tar. Enoch crushed it under his heel. Later that day, the sheriff came. He stood tall in the doorframe, dust on his boots, and a look in his eyes that said he'd wrestled with this visit longer than he wanted to admit. "Enoch," he began, hat in hand. "Some folks are uneasy." Enoch said nothing. The sheriff cleared his throat. "There's talk. 'Bout the girl." Miriam stood behind Enoch, silent. "She's caused no trouble," the sheriff added quickly. "But you know how people are." "I know exactly how they are," Enoch said. The sheriff glanced at Miriam, then back at Enoch. "I can't protect you if something happens." "You won't have to." The sheriff shifted. "There's a wagon leavin' for Clearwater. Big town. Colored orphanage. School too. She'd be safe there." "No," Enoch said. Miriam stepped forward. "Let me speak." Both men looked at her. "I ain't your problem," she said, her voice even. "But I'm also not a shadow. You can see me, talk to me, ask me what I want. And I'll tell you, I'm not going anywhere." The sheriff studied her, then nodded. "Just wanted to say my piece." He left. The silence he left behind stayed longer. That night, Enoch said nothing for hours. Then, over the fire, he finally spoke. "When I came back from war, I thought I'd earned peace. Lost my brothers. Lost my wife. Thought maybe if I just kept to myself, the world would leave me be." Miriam waited. "But it don't work like that. You hide long enough, people fill in your silence with their fears." She looked at him. "So what now? We stop hiding." The next Sunday, they went to town church. Miriam wore her best, simple blue calico, hair tied in 2 long braids, boots polished clean. Ruthie held her hand the whole walk. Elijah carried the hymn book. The church fell silent when they entered. No one moved. Pastor Graham looked up from the pulpit and paused mid-sermon. Enoch met his eyes and gave a slight nod, daring him to say something. The pastor swallowed, then turned the page. "Let's begin again." They sat in the last pew. No one greeted them. But no one asked them to leave either. Afterward, as the congregation filed out, Mrs. Harland, the baker's widow, walked past and said, "Pretty braids, child." Then kept walking. It wasn't much, but it was something. Later that week, Miriam went to the creek alone. She carried a bucket, but she needed more than water. She needed to breathe. The forest had always felt like a place where her skin didn't matter, where the trees didn't ask questions, where roots twisted like her thoughts, dark, tangled, but growing still. She knelt to fill the bucket, and that's when she heard it. The click of a hammer being pulled back. She rose slowly. Caleb Whitlock stood 10 feet away, revolver raised, eyes colder than river ice. "I warned you," he said. She didn't run. "Pa said you were poison," he hissed. "Ma begged me to clean up her mistake. I didn't listen. You think I'm still scared of you?" He stepped closer. "You should be." "Then shoot," she whispered. "But know this, I die, and every soul in Granger's Hollow will know your name for it." He hesitated. "I ain't that girl you tied up anymore." Caleb's lip curled. "You were born dirty. And you were born empty." Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or the realization that she wasn't playing his game anymore. She stepped forward. "I ain't leavin'. I belong to no one. Not to your shame. Not to your hate. Not to your name." He raised the gun higher. Then a voice broke through the trees. "Drop it, Enoch." Rifle aimed. Steady hands. Breath even. "Don't think I won't shoot," he said. Caleb turned slowly, gun still half raised. Behind him, Elijah appeared with the hatchet. "You're outnumbered," the boy said, voice flat. "Outmatched, too." For the first time, Caleb looked unsure. Ruthie appeared last, peeking around a tree. She didn't speak, just stared. Caleb lowered the gun. "You gonna let this girl ruin your name?" he sneered. "She didn't ruin anything," Enoch said. "She saved it." Miriam stepped forward. "I'll never forget what you did, but I'll never fear you again." Caleb backed away. "You're dead," he muttered. "All of you." Enoch lowered his rifle just enough to say, "Then make it quick." But Caleb didn't fire. He turned and vanished into the woods, boots slipping in the moss. They didn't follow. Later, back at the cabin, Enoch said, "He'll run. Cowards don't linger where they've been beat." Miriam sat by the fire, silent. Ruthie climbed into her lap and whispered, "He can't take you. You're ours." The flames flickered in her eyes. She looked at Enoch, at the children, at the house that still stood despite it all. She had been sold, silenced, feared, but not forgotten. Not anymore. That night, she stood outside beneath the stars, letting the cold wind braid through her fingers. She didn't shiver. Enoch joined her. "You all right?" he asked. "I think I'm finally becoming." "Becoming what?" "Who I was always meant to be." He didn't reply, just stood beside her, watching the sky. Spring would come soon, and with it, wildflowers in the ash. Miriam would plant them herself. And when folks asked, she'd say this is where the old world ended, and the real one began. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.